Shemitah year that was awesome.
Hey, this is Corey. I spent another summer at the Ramah Garden, and for the first time, we intentionally left quite a bit fallow. So it was really it was a good experience, and I learned a lot, including seeing what grows when you don't plant, in the beds, what happens. And we taught the kids about Shemitah, which was awesome that we got a chance to do that.
Mm-hmm. That is. Did anyone have a piece of land that they decided not to garden this year? The way Corey was just mentioning.
Unfortunately, life just made it so. It wasn't a conscious Shemitah choice.
No. That's
Same here. I've let my entire land fallow. That's
everyone, I think, is aware, or maybe not, that Shemitah of not planting only applies in Eretz Yisrael. And so, to the extent that we did it outside of Israel, it's a kind of a zecher l'Shemitah, which is a great thing. So we do have 44 people signed up. So I'm gonna wait a little bit longer till people come in. Is that okay with you, Sachia?
yeah, let's I would say we give it another 3-4 minutes, and they keep streaming in. I'm admitting them.
Yes. One thing I'm curious about is, did anyone observe Shemitah by being prepared to cancel a debt in a few days when Rosh Hashanah comes?
I cancel all of my credit card debt.
Yeah, that works. That works.
Yeah. The thing you can do if you want to squeeze in an extra Shemitah mitzvah before the end of the year is loan a few dollars to somebody and then forgive the debt. And it's really more symbolic than anything, but it's kind of fun to do something to remember Shemitah in that way. You also might have someone that owes you money from some time ago, and you can also consider that debt canceled if you think about it. Yeah. Hi, Bruce. We're still gathering people here. I did my first class on Shemitah and debt ever just a few weeks ago with Eitzim, Green Zionism. And I have to say, I've always focused on the land because I'm an environmental, that's my focus, ecology, environment, nature. But there's a lot to be said for what Shmitat Kisafim, releasing debts, releasing money, says about how to create an ideal society. Really a society that stands independent from the kind of capitalism that we live under now. Who thinks that Shemitah was observed for real in Eretz Yisrael in ancient times?
I do.
It's a debated discussion.
Yeah.
And most people think that Jubilee was never observed.
Oh, I disagree with those people.
Me too.
Well, isn't it possible that there were some people who observed it and observed it scrupulously, even if it wasn't a fully national thing?
That's certainly true for Shemitah. I think we can be sure of that.
We can also be sure of the fact that nothing was ever scrupulously anybody, and nothing has ever been fully done, Jewish, non-Jewish, any law.
Folks, we're waiting for more people to show up, and in a few minutes we'll start. Very soon, actually. Yeah, but Jubilee, in order for Jubilee to be practiced, it really requires a whole society commitment.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah.
possible to do it on an individual level.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, partly why a lot of people believe it was never observed. It's even mysterious to the degree that we don't know for sure if Jubilee was the 49th year or the 50th year. That's another debate.
Hmm.
Although I feel sure it's the 50th year.
Yeah, I thought for sure it was the 50th. I didn't even know that was a debate.
It was a debate, yeah.
Hmm.
Another thing to note is that this is the second Shemitah that is widely observed and has been widely observed and paid attention to in the world since ancient times. Only the second one. And in fact, the previous one, Adin Steinsaltz declared to be the beginning of the Jubilee cycle. So this would be the second Shemitah. No, this would be the first Shemitah of the new cycle, I guess. So in 42 years, we're gonna see if we can work ourselves towards doing a Jubilee, which is something that a lot of us will not be alive to see, but we can lay the groundwork, pun intended. So folks, we're going to start just in a little bit more. I want you all to take a few minutes as we're waiting to think about how the Shemitah year impacted you this year. And that could be something very large and year-long, and it could be just something you thought of the other day. It doesn't have to be a huge project or a real change in how you lived for a whole year, but it might be. It might be something like that. Or what did you do to remind yourself that it was the Shemitah year over the course of the year? Like, for example, I wrote a Harachaman for the Shemitah year, for the Birkat Hamazon, for the blessing after the meal. So I've said that through the whole year, and that's been a way to stay connected to the Shemitah year, even when I wasn't doing anything on the farm or connected to the farm. Even though I know more people are going to come, I think it's
Yeah, I think we could probably, we have 23 people, and I could probably introduce you.
yeah,
Even
I think so.
We've already started. We could give it another minute, but okay, one more person coming in. I think let's start, right? Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
We definitely have a wonderful showing.
I have a question. It says it's streaming live to Facebook. Which site?
To my Neo Chassid page, but I'm looking on it right now to find it. I don't even know how to find it, to be honest.
You can look under videos, or if you look under your story, if it's live, it should show it. It might show it there.
I'm not going to worry about it now because it's just going to confuse me. So let's not worry about it.
Yeah, let's
If
begin.
it exists out there, then that's great. And if not, well, that's life. So go ahead, let's start.
Yeah, it's my honor to introduce our teacher and scholar, Rabbi David Seidenberg. I'm not going to read straight out of his bio. That's in the emails. I know David to be a thoughtful, deep, articulate teacher and scholar, and we're going to be talking about the concept of hefker, of ownerlessness, and Shemitah. And it is a true honor to be able to learn from you about this, about ownerless and hefker. On a personal level, I've been thinking about it a lot, especially the hefker part. So really looking forward to this. David is also the creator of neohasid.org and an author of Kabbalah and Ecology, God's image in the more than human world. And I would recommend everybody get a copy and read it. It is a great book. I've read it front to back, and the notes. The notes themselves are a work of art. And with that, I could share a little personal Shemitah thing. For me, this year has been a true Shemitah year, in the sense that I've let go of so much. And this was the first year that I realized that Shemitah year is not the restart, but actually this coming year, when the first year starts, that's when the new cycle begins. That's when the revolution starts. And I'm looking forward to this Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah. Beautiful. So as you may know, and this isn't directly related to the theme of the class, but it's directly related to what this all means. Debts are not canceled till the very end of the Shemitah year, which also reflects that idea that really the beginning is after the Shemitah year. And then we have Hakel, which is the last thing that happens in the Shemitah year, which is for sure after the Shemitah year, which is kind of like the Havdalah or Shemitah. So we still have a fair amount of Shemitah left, all the way through Sukkot, which is when Hakel would happen, even though it may seem like it's almost over. So I wanted to start with a surprising text that isn't the theme of the class, but I think will undergird some of the questions that I wanted us to be asking. So this is a text about Shmitat Kisafim, or related to Shmitat Kisafim. It's actually not directly about Shemitah Kisafim. It's about the question of what money means in the world. And I'm going to read this out loud. This is not my translation. Usually I use my translations, but this is straight from Sefaria. So it talks about needing to furnish someone who you're releasing from service with enough wealth to get restarted in their lives, from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your wine press. And the halachic discussion is, I might think it means only from these three things. And so if you don't have a flock or a threshing floor or a wine press, you don't have to give anything. But then the verse says, with everything that God blessed you, that includes everything. But then why do you have to specify? Why not just say everything? So here's the part that's especially interesting. Just as these three things are fit for receiving blessing. So it only applies to things that receive blessing, to exclude money, which is not fit for blessing. And this is just an interesting question. What does this mean? And we have a clue at the very end. These are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Eliezer says to exclude mules because they don't reproduce. So all the other things are based on the natural surplus production that nature does in every species, with every way and everything, constantly bringing forth more and more and more. And that's the thing that's fit for blessing. Things that humans create that cannot sustain themselves, cannot become part of the ecosystem, are not fit for blessing. And it just struck me, I'm going to stop the share of this. It just struck me so strongly that in our society, when we say what can I do to save up for my, it's all about saving up. What can I do for my future? Well, you save up money because money you can invest and money grows. Money is the source of blessing, the way we structure our reality. And the Sifrei says money's not fit for receiving blessing. It can't even receive blessing, even if you wish it could. That's not how it works. What a different way of looking at the world. So I want to start just with keeping in mind, Shemitah is, in theory, grounded in a whole culture that is a very different way of looking at the world. And part of the challenge of Shemitah is to get our minds inside of what was really going on for our ancestors. And the next thing I want to share, and most of this is not going to be me talking, but some of it is. So the next thing I want to share, and let me put up the URLs for this. Hang on one second. Here's a bunch of URLs, and I'll probably have to post them again. So the one that I'm opening right now is the third one. But you don't have to open it right now. You just can open it in the future if you want. It's just a little reminder about what's going on in Shemitah according to the Torah texts that are crucial to what we're looking at today. So here we have Exodus 23. 6 years you will sow your land and gather your produce, and the seventh you will release Tishmetena and forswear or forego or just not take from. And the poor of your people will eat, and their remainder the animal of the fields will eat. And then it's connected immediately after that to Shabbat. 6 days will you do your works, and in the seventh day you will stop for the sake of your ox and your donkey resting, lema'an yanuach, right? And your female servant, child, and the stranger resoling. That's a creative translation of what the word vayinafesh might mean, since it doesn't occur in many places at all. So we have an idea of equality between servants and those who are, in some sense, masters, between poor and everyone else who might be rich, and also between the animals and the human beings, which is a very important thing to note. And I want to ask you to think for a moment. Chayat Sadeh means what in particular, what kind of animal? So there's two words for animal in Torah, behema and chaya. And these can mean either, behema can mean a prey animal and chaya can mean a predatory animal, or behema can mean a domesticated animal and chaya can mean a wild animal. When you have it in this formulation, chayat hasadeh, animal of the field, it means for sure the pshat is wild animal as opposed to predator animal. And in most cases in Torah, it means wild animal. In tefillah, sometimes chaya is likely to mean predatory animal. The next thing, and I'm just making sure we're on the same page with the texts. Why is my cursor not working? Oh, there we go. Okay, I had to. There we go. Okay, here I'm going to continue to share. So the next little section, keta, that I want to look at with you. This is from Leviticus 25, where we've already heard about how, well, here, the seventh year is a Shabbaton. And you shouldn't do any work and you should rest, the land should rest. And then here we have, and the Shabbat of the land will be for eating for you and for your male servant and for your female servant and for your hired worker and for your settler living as a stranger with you, and for your beast and for the animal which is in your land, chaya asher ba'artzecha. All of her produce will be to eat. And again, we have this sense of going through all the classes of society to be inclusive of everyone. And then we have your beast behema, which for sure in this context means domesticated animal. And for the animal which is in your land, chaya asher ba'artzecha, all of her produce will be to eat, which means wild animal, not predator animal in this case also. So here's a quick trivia question I might ask you all. What is the halacha we derive from the fact that the Torah says that everything that grows is also for the wild animal? Does anyone know what the halacha is? Very important principle. Okay. Do you know, Psachia? I will reveal the answer momentarily.
You can reveal it.
Okay.
Related to Baal Tashchit, or
No, it's the psak based on this, and you can look this up in Mishnah Torah, is that you have to take down your fences and leave open your gates. Because a poor person can open the gate by themselves, but a wild animal can't. So if you're going to fulfill this mitzvah, which says that what grows is also for the wild animal, then you have to leave the gates open or take them down or take the whole fence down if you want to really be zeriz about, really serious about the mitzvah. So this raises the kind of fundamental question that I want us to think about. If we're opening our gates so that the wild animals can come into the land, what we are doing is breaking down the boundary between the human space and the more than human world, so that the two are not separate in the Shemitah year. So most of the time, society spends a fair amount of energy separating itself from the natural world around it. And this is not necessarily a negative thing. Humans need social spaces to be human beings together. It doesn't require completely destroying and subjugating nature. It just requires creating a human space, ideally, where humans can do their human thing without destroying nature, because they have their own little human space to be in. But however we think about the human space, we spend a lot of time maintaining its distinction from the more than human world. And that distinction is also reified and reinforced by things like natural parks. Those are places where humans don't live. And these are places where humans do live. For example, although putting it under the framework of natural park is in essence domesticating the wilderness, making it part of our household. So question is, what does it mean to break down the barriers between the human space and the more than human space, the more than human world? How does that relate to social justice and social transformation within the human space? This is the fundamental question. And what does it mean spiritually to experience the world through that lens? So that's what I want to focus on here. And that's where we're going to go to the texts. So I'm going to share the screen again. And now this time I'm going to the texts that are in the first two links there. Do people that are coming in after have these, or do I have to repost them for everyone? In case I do, I'm just going to repost them again.
Yeah, I can keep reposting them. You don't have to worry.
Okay, so the first link is to the source sheet that I'm sharing. And the second link is larger print for people that might be helpful to. The larger print isn't carefully laid out so that every section is on its own. It's on one page and doesn't get split, but it might be helpful to people. So if wilderness is the leitmotif of Shemitah, what does the midrash teach about what wilderness means? And of course, the title of this text sheet is Hefker Lekulam, free to everyone. Because the other aspect of what it means to say that it's wilderness is that there is no ownership of Shemitah produce in the Shemitah year. So everything that grows from the land in the Shemitah year is Hefker, and therefore can be claimed by anyone, but may not be hoarded by anyone or sold by anyone. Again, that's an affirmation that this is outside the normal human realm. We treat what grows from the land as if we were foraging in the wilderness. And similar to rules for foraging in the wilderness, you take what you need. If you want the species that you're foraging from to survive, you take what you need. You don't take enough to create a company to sell it. That's not how you live. So what does wilderness mean? And how is it related to Hefker? These are what these texts are going to focus on. So first of all, Midrash Tanchuma. And now we can take turns reading if someone wants to do that. Does someone feel motivated? Larry, do you want to read the first text? You can just do the English. If you want to throw in the Hebrew, you're welcome to. Oh, you're muted.
Unmute. Okay. So this is Midrash Tanchuma, Bamidbar 6:1, right? Is that what we're? Okay. Then Yah spoke unto Moshe in the Sinai wilderness, the Midbar Sinai. Why in the Sinai wilderness? From here, our rabbis taught the Torah was given through three things: through fire, through water, and through wilderness. Through fire, as it says, Exodus 19, now all of Mount Sinai was smoking. Through water, as it says, when you went forth from Seir, even the clouds dropped water. Through wilderness, as it says, in the Sinai wilderness. And why was it given through these three things? Just as these are free, chinam, to all who come into the world, so too are the words of the Torah free to all who come into the world. Thus it said, Isaiah 55, ho, all who are thirsty, come to the waters of Torah. Even if you have no money, come get food, eat without cost.
Thank you. And Corey, can I ask you to read the second text, which is a short one?
David, I'm outside with my dog. There's a lot of noise here, so I'm sorry I can't read.
It sounds fine. I'm not hearing any noise if you want to give it a shot.
I have to keep an eye on her.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, Yarrow, do you want to read the next one?
Yes. Actually, it's too low on my screen. There you go. In the Sinai wilderness. Why in the Sinai wilderness? Because whoever does not make themselves ownerless, hekfer, like the wilderness, cannot acquire the Torah. Therefore, it says, in the Sinai wilderness.
Yeah, and the word, which is unusual for many people, hefker. And it actually does not, this word, which is so key to Shemitah and so key to all this midrash, is not in the Torah or the Tanakh. It's a rabbinic word. It's a rabbinic word. Chinam, the previous word for free and available to all, in the previous text rather, that does appear in the Torah, but hefker does not. So it's an interesting, just on that level, how concepts and theology interweave with etymology and such. So we have two ideas here. One is that the Torah is given in wilderness because it is hefker. I'm going to just use the word hefker, even though the word chinam is used there, because it is hefker, or rather, its essence is that it must be hefker in order to fulfill its purpose. And then the second text here says, and if you want to receive Torah, you have to yourself become hefker. And one suggestion from these two texts together, and you'll notice they come from the same section of the midrash, one follows the other, is that somehow being in the space of the Sinai wilderness around the mountain, right? In that space that's hefker, enables you to be the one who yourself is hefker, becomes like the wilderness, and therefore be able to acquire Torah. There's a relationship between the place you're in and what you can become yourself. That's found here, right? So a big question would be, and here, let's see if we have a few responses or ideas. What would it mean to make, and there's not one answer, by the way. I'm not fishing for an answer, and I don't have a particular answer that I think is the answer. What does it mean to make yourself hefker? Oseh atzmo hefker is the words in Hebrew. Any suggestion about what you think that might mean is something that I'm interested in hearing. I'm going to stop the share so I can see your faces. And here, it's better to venture a guess that you're not committing to than to wait and not speak up. Yeah. So just unmute and go ahead. Yeah, Yarrow, go ahead.
Flowing as water in a river that flows in two directions at the same time.
Say more about the river flowing in two directions.
I don't know. I just like the idea of give and take, like you give and you receive. That's what freedom is, but that's also what giving and taking in terms of money and resources, giving and receiving. But to bring it into nature, just when you see rivers that are moving so much that the water's actually going in two directions.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Ellen Weaver, where's that?
My sense is of not holding on tightly to anything, to our ownership, to our even narrow connections, that the more we can be in spaciousness, interconnected with all of the more than human, all of it, that asayat small hefker, that we can then have enough space to receive Torah.
Mhm.
Yes.
There were two other hands that went up, but I'm not seeing them now. Do those people want to speak up?
Yeah, Aaron? Aaron?
Yeah, thank you. I feel this means for me that any insights I have in understanding Torah or wisdom more generally, I shouldn't treat it as chattel property. That just as the Torah is given in the Sinai wilderness, so also the wisdom I receive and generate from below as a denizen of this place of Sinai where the Torah was given, I should treat similarly.
Available to all,
Yeah,
freely available.
yeah, that's correct.
And freely available means free to take and to give in the way that Yarrow was talking about. Didn't anyone else have a hand or a comment they wanted to add?
Stern shared in the comments the removal, being free from attachment, and Ilana shared the removal of ego.
Mhm. So people are getting kind of a Buddhist feeling in a way about what this might be saying, which I also wonder about.
And I also said about the ebb and flow of the tide as the Red Sea did for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hear in the ebb and flow something of to be chinam and to be hefker, it's making myself hefker, making myself chinam. So when I talk about attachment or like I'm owning other things, that's kind of me preventing another being from being able to be free and to be chinam and to be hefker, but not actually myself. Myself would have to be a rejection of the power structures that are compelling me, I think. So I would have to free myself. I could free others from my grasp and my grip, but I would have to free myself. It has to do with what is ruling over me. On a physical way, it would be rebelling against those structures. In a spiritual way, I think it might be I'm being pushed around in this world by the things that compel me, desires, feeling of lack, whatever it is that I have, and not to not participate in the world, but to be free of those as compelling me and forcing me to do things in my life.
To choose based on your own.
Yeah, to be free, like I have choices and making them all the time, but are they free? Like in a spiritual sense, am I just being compelled by my desires or by needs or, whatever?
One thing that's interesting is that in English, there's one word free that covers a very wide range. It covers chinam, it covers hefker, it covers freedom and liberty of the kind that Psachi is talking about. And in Hebrew, there are different words. We have chinam, we have hefker, and we have dror, for example, which is mentioned very prominently in the rules and laws about Shemitah in Leviticus 25. So they're clearly tightly interwoven because they all appear in this context of Shemitah year. Yeah. And they appear, does the last one appear? I think they all appear also in relation to the giving of the Torah. Or another word, cherut, as we say, as the midrash says, don't read charut al haluchot, but cherut al haluchot. Don't read that the tablets were engraved, but read that freedom was on the tablets, was part of the tablets. It's a wordplay on charut, engrave, and cherut, freedom. So all these things, we have different vocabulary. Of course, we have different vocabulary in English if we want, but we don't have one word in Hebrew that covers the whole range. We have a bunch of different words. And I think actually that's not going to be for today because I don't know that I have the resources to do it, but doing a careful study of like, what of those words applies where, and how can we divide up the idea of freedom carefully into these, it might be stages of development. It might be stages of society. It might be levels of society, individual versus house versus community versus world. There's different ways to imagine how it goes. But the other thing I want to mention is, what does it mean to make yourself available? Because in a way that could potentially go in the opposite direction of what Petachia is saying. About freedom, because if you want to be free from obligations, if you imagine that you're available to everyone, it means kind of making yourself obligated to respond to what everyone's needs are. Right? And so the two kinds of freedom are in tension with each other. Making yourself free to other people and making yourself free from the obligations imposed by other people can push against each other. Now we're going to read some Shemitah texts. So I'm going to share the screen again. Rashi on Leviticus. So here's the verse: "You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest, and you shall not pick the grapes you had set aside for yourself, for it shall be a Sabbath of Sabbaths, a year of rest for the land." Okay. Now, this is a reflection, by the way, of all the agricultural laws that we have. There's so many laws about what you can't take. You can't take the corners of the field. You can't, which is called peah. You can't take shichacha, the thing you forgot to harvest when you went through the first time. You're not allowed to go back and harvest. Leket, anything that dropped while you were harvesting, you're not allowed to pick it up. You have to leave it for someone else to get. And just in general, there's this idea that already, even not in the Shemitah year, your land is freely available to be accessed by at least anyone who's poor, who needs it. You can't even have a fence and lock out those people. You have to always have time when people can come in freely and take from your field. So this is a little bit more extreme, or complete, I think is more the right word, rather than extreme. I think I'll read this one. "You will not reap" means you can't grab Shemitah produce from your harvest as if it was your property, as you do other harvests, but it shall be hefker for everyone. Set aside anything that you intended to keep people away from and didn't make hefker. Dafka, you will not gather to store. You are not allowed to, if you set something aside in the Shemitah year and said, that's going to be my grapevine, then you're not allowed to eat from it. You've forbidden yourself from eating from it by imagining that it could be set aside for yourself. So that's a certain, I think, pretty radical way of thinking about it. That just the intention of holding on to something will force you to let it go. The next one's from Maharala Prague. So this is much later. Oh no, actually, let's not do that one yet. Let's see if anyone has anything to say about the Shemitah one we just read. And let me add number 5 here as well to the discussion about this. Beit Shammai says, that which is made ownerless only for sake of giving it to the poor really is ownerless, is hefker. Beit Hillel says, it's not ownerless unless it's really available to everyone, including the rich. If you want to make something hefker, everyone should be able to have it, like in the Shemitah year, like in the sabbatical year. Now, this debate about what hefker means kind of goes in a way to some of the heart of this question. What does it mean to be hefker? What does it mean to make yourself hefker? To be available to all, or to be available to the needy? Who counts as the needy, etc. Now, does anyone want to say anything about that? Yes, Yarrow.
I'm wondering about the Hebrew translation for the word produce, and if it refers to just fruit, veg, and grain, or if it also is the animals that have reproduced that are for our consumption.
Where was the word produce, just to be sure?
It was at the beginning of this, but it was also in the last reading. The Shemitah produce, it says in the first sentence.
Oh, there we go. Oh, lo tiksor liot machzik bo ka'asher katsir ela hefker. That's interpretive. It's not literally in the Hebrew. It's just making it.
But sha'ar katsir would be what's left over from harvesting or reaping.
Mm-hmm.
That would be different from, that wouldn't be the term used for animals.
Yeah. Yeah. So katsir, people know the word, means harvest, to cut down. So in general, Shemitah rules do not apply to domesticated animals in the sense of they're not free to all. You still own them, you still use them, you can still slaughter them for food, and they don't become free to anyone. They're simply stay yours. Right? So that's another question to ask about. What does it mean that animals are treated one way and what grows from the land is treated a different way? And I think that has a lot to do with the question of what is a human space, which is defined by the land more than it is defined by, well, the word is in Aramaic, karka is land, and everything else that you own is metaltalin, things that are movable and don't have the same weight and don't count the same way.
But farm animals were a major source of your financial life in these days. That's why I'm confused about the Shemitah part of it.
Yeah. The one thing that is worth noting is that the animals that are yours also have to follow Shemitah rules for what they can eat. You can't hoard food for them that's grown in the Shemitah year. You can store up grain from previous years to feed to your animals. But if you want them to have what's growing in the Shemitah year, they can go out and graze what they want, but you can't, and you can collect enough to give them, a little bit, but you can't store it up for them any more than you can store it up for yourself. Okay, we're interweaving this between texts about Torah and Revelation and texts about Shemitah. So this one, Maharal of Prague, is about Torah, and I think it's a pretty interesting one. Let's see, who should I ask to read? Or Fred, do you want to read this one?
The Torah is not relative to humanity, for humanity is materialistic, but the Torah is idealistic, intellectual, and is separated from humanity. Therefore, the Torah was given through these three, fire, water, wilderness, for these things are forever irrevocably ownerless, hefker, which shows they are not specifically for ownership by people.
Mm-hmm. This is a bit of a complicated set of ideas, I would say. So he's building on the midrash we read, given through things that are hefker. Something that is irrevocably hefker is another concept that we haven't come across. The Hebrew is hefker le'olam. Can you see when I highlight something? Does that show up on your screens also? Yeah, hefker le'olam.
Yes.
Okay, good. So Torah is hefker le'olam. Permanently, forever, irrevocably ownerless.
Well, what's interesting about that is he said he's suggesting that it's that way because it's sikhlit, because it's intellectual.
Mhm.
So he would probably think intellectual property was an oxymoron because he was
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
like this free and wild, as opposed to geshem, like gashmiut, the material that is can be grabbed, but intellect can't. It's free, which I don't think we're not trained that way anymore. It seems that's obvious to him, but
And the word for materialistic that I've translated as materialistic is Baal Geshem. Geshem means rain, but in later Hebrew, Gashmiut means materialism, and Ruchniut, wind, being windy is spiritual, and being rainy is being materialistic. So I don't entirely agree with this sentiment that the essence of Torah is that it's sichlit, that it's this intellectual thing. But I think it's an interesting idea to put into our discussion.
And it's ownerless, but yet you are obligated to quote the person you've learned something from.
Yeah.
If I go tomorrow and teach what you're teaching us, and I don't say, well, I learned this in a session that Rabbi David Seidenberg led for Hazon, then I've transgressed in some way. You may not get any money for it. It's not your property, but I am obligated to the extent I can, say where I got this from.
That's true, and that's another side to the whole question. However, I do want to point out that it's talking about the actual Torah here in that midrash. That is, the Torah is given as a physical thing in the way the way midrash thinks about it, a physical thing, the Torah, and then the oral Torah is also given. The oral Torah has no boundaries, and inherently grows and is a subject of blessing, actually, in the way that other things can grow naturally. The written Torah is something that we like to think is our Torah. And Jews can be quite possessive about our Torah, and that makes perfect sense. But the Midrash keeps telling us in different ways that we don't own the Torah. It's not a Jewish Torah, it's a human Torah. And that's maybe changes how we relate to the Torah a little bit. And for some people, maybe it changes how they relate to the Torah quite a bit.
it would also, just to add, David, you said it's a human Torah. It's not a Jewish Torah, it's a human Torah, but it seems from here, it's not even a human Torah. It's a wild Torah. It's more than human, right?
Right. Yeah. Because he says it's not, that's what he says. You're right. And that's a really good point. There was another text that comes up that makes that point also in an interesting way. Let's see, where is it? I'm not going to worry about searching for it, but maybe we'll come across it and look at it. Here's another, why was it given in the wilderness? This is again from Tanchuma, but a different version of Tanchuma called Tanchuma Buber, a different recension that we have. Let's see, who can I ask to read this time? Judith, do you want to read, Judith?
Okay. Why was it given in the wilderness? Starting there.
Mhm.
Why was it given in the wilderness? Because if it had been given in the land of Canaan, the tribe in whose border it was would say, I come first in claiming it. For that reason, it was given in the wilderness where all would be equal. The word I think is shavin.
Shavin.
Shavin, in claiming it. And why else was it given in the wilderness? Just as wilderness is not sown or cultivated, so are those who receive the words of Torah. They remove from them the yoke of government and of society. Just as a wilderness does not get levied, so the progeny of Torah are progeny of freedom.
The last line, I'm not sure I get the realia of. Torah scholars weren't taxed. Is that what that means? I'm not going to worry about the last line too much unless someone else knows more about it than I, in which case, please let me know. I'm interested especially in three things from this text. First is this is the first of the texts that we have that mentions equality, shavin, all would be equal in claiming it. So that we have a new concept, a new definition of hefker, which is that something that's hefker, everyone is equal in relationship to it. So it implies a general idea of equality. And then here we have a phrase that clearly connects to the Shemitah year, just as wilderness is not sown or cultivated. If that's the essence of wilderness, to not be sown or cultivated, then again, in the Shemitah year, we're making the land that we farm into wilderness. It's not sown or cultivated. So those who receive the words of Torah. So the question here is, the big meta question here that I have is, does the practice of Shemitah prepare us to receive revelation because it prepares us to make ourselves hefker? And if so, what's the revelation that we should be receiving? That's the big question. And for me, it's not a question that I have an answer to. It's a question that I want to keep asking. And I'm interested in how it resonates with you, that question. So let's go to one more Shemitah text. And maybe this might, I mean, we've done a lot of texts here. Maybe we've done enough texts. Let's see. I'm going to do one more which connects to equality. There's quite a few texts in this collection here to study, so we're not going to get to all of them. Let's see. Jack, are you available to read?
I'm on a phone.
Oh, don't worry about it.
I'm on a phone and squinting.
Lexi, how about you?
Sure, I can read. It is a positive commandment to release ownership of everything that comes out of the earth in the seventh year, as it says. And the seventh you will release and forsake. And one who locks up their vineyard or fences their field in the seventh year has nullified a positive commandment. And similarly, if one gathers all their fruits into the house, rather, everything should be made ownerless, yafkir hakol, and everyone's hand equal, shavin, having equal claim, as it says, the poor of your people will eat.
Yeah, thank you. So you see, he's turned hefker into a verb, which you don't see very often, but it occurs. I'm not sure if Maimonides made that up. And here again, we have equality, everyone's hand being equal. So we're talking about human equality in this text. In other texts, we're talking about equality between all species, it seems, and that's an interesting, different angle on it. So rather than the bigger question, how does Shemitah prepare us for revelation? A smaller and quite easier question is, how does Shemitah teach us about equality? And here, I think it's important to put in a question that I've been asking all year that I feel like I have an answer to, which is, why do we cancel debts at the end of the Shemitah year instead of at the beginning of the Shemitah year? So, how does Shemitah teach us about equality? And here, I mean, it's very easy to answer the question in a kind of intellectual way, but I'm also interested in, how does Shemitah teach you on a personal level, or how has Shemitah taught you on a personal level about equality?
I think, something that was coming up for me, I've been thinking a lot about mycorrhizal networks in forests, and the way that need is something that appears in a particular moment, and for a particular thing. Maybe it's carbon, maybe it's nitrogen, maybe it's water, and so this idea of labeling a being as poor or as rich, and having these distinctions sort of come from these notions of, putting up walls and having these spaces of acquisition, and sort of trying to shield ourselves from having need, and yet need still arises. And I think there's something about equality in that, and that we are never free from needs, because needs have, a particular nature and in a particular moment. And it feels like kind of the teachings of wilderness are so connected to that of sort of needs or gradients being something that emerge in a state. And so, in Shemitah, where those walls come down, and in a space of wilderness, and that kind of the dynamics that we come closer to, there is I feel that in the sense of the essence of equality.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do we have other ideas that people want to throw out? Yeah, Yarrow? And then Helena, did you have a hand up? That go after if you did. And then Judith. Go ahead, Yarrow.
I was just thinking about the idea of wilderness versus the human space, and how more in the Native American tradition, there is no difference between wilderness and human space. And in California, this idea of wilderness versus urban, and that I'm ready to look towards an area that it's all the same. It's all the same. It's all one planet. I mean, I live in the forest, so it's different for me, but like the idea of where our fence ends and the wilderness and the trees start. Mostly I've learned a lot from the book called Tending the Wild, which is about California Native Americans and how they tended the wild. There was they weren't gatherers or agriculturalists. They were one and the same. They were tending the wild and eating from the wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It kind of raises a question. Can you have a culture that is always in Shemitah? That is never about personal acquisition. It is never about fencing inland because it's yours. Because there might be a suggestion that, yes, that's possible. But then that raises another question. If that's possible, why wasn't it something that our ancestors aimed for? This is what they aimed for. They aimed for continual renewal. So you have the fences, you have the human space that's very distinct from the wild space, but you periodically remind yourself that that boundary is not real.
That's exactly what I was saying, a way of thinking about it as opposed to what you're actually doing on the land.
Another thing to think about is that the difference in cultures might be a difference in ecosystems. That is, the best way for people to fully and well survive and thrive in the ecosystem that existed before colonization in North America was this kind of thing of tending the wilderness. Like, for example, the native practice in some tribes to set the forest on fire to clear out the undergrowth, which made it the forest much better for moose and deer and things that you might want to eat, animals that you might want to eat. And
it killed the bugs so that you could also eat more of the plant matter.
Killed the what?
It killed the bugs for the acorns here in my area, they burned every 10 years because of the bugs that would get to the acorns.
Every 10 years, it's also interesting to think about cycles that might have resonance with our Shemitah. Judith, you had a hand up.
Yeah, I just can't help, reading it through, where we live in the world today. This is so antithetical to, the realities of feeling very defined by what you own, by what you have. It's the toxic reality of the capitalist world we live in. So, if you say, because we have a Shemitah culture, you could hear the political flag go, well, that's socialism, but this is, such a great challenge to how do we really think about, living in a state of interbeing.
Thanks, Cole. Yes, just interrupt.
This sort of interbeing of, who we really are, that and versus these, there's one thing about having fences and boundaries, another thing about really having, like huge walls and tremendous barriers, and encapsulating oneself to be, so separate from the world. And I think it speaks to how much disconnect the world is living in. And Shemitah is such a powerful corrective to that.
Mhm. Yeah. Shemitah, periodic Shemitah means that you're never going to build your walls that high, probably, one would imagine. You're always bringing them down a bit. I want to point out something in the Maimonides text that we were looking at, which relates to what was said just now. So he says, he quotes the phrase, the poor of your people will eat. That's the phrase from Exodus about the Shemitah year. That's where it says, and the wild animal will eat, right? But he says that this means everyone's hand is equal. Not the poor people's hand is equal to the rich, but everyone's hand is equal. So that it's a transformation from a time when there's poor and rich to a time where everyone feels equality in a deeper level. Let's unshare that for now. I'm looking to see if there's any text I really want to make sure we get in here before we. Yeah, let's do this last one. This is Rashi.
Jill asked, do kibbutzim live in a Shemitah culture yearly?
Yearly, always? Within the space of the kibbutz, you mean because there's equality between the people? It seems like that would be meaningfully resonant with Shemitah culture. Yeah. Does the kibbutz represent a fulfillment of the ideals of Shemitah? In what ways does it? In what ways might it not? Let's read this next one and see if that maybe has some answers for that question, actually. It might be related. So we're reading Rashi on Leviticus 25:6. And Helena, did you have a hand raised before, or was that just
It's Fred. Fred has his hand raised.
okay.
I don't want to go in too much of a separate direction, but I just wanted to mention that I've been thinking about this ownerlessness question, and it's something I do think about a lot, about what we call resources, which are neither food nor land, but particularly carbon. And so I always think, who owns the resources of the world? I understand the ownership regime as it is in the world, but really, who really owns petroleum products, for instance, or minerals? It's very important. I think eventually, where we're headed for a carbon-free world, we're going to say that the carbon that's still in the ground doesn't get used. So does that mean everyone owns it? And we've decided collectively we're not going to put it to use, perhaps. Is that, by the way, if everyone owns it, is that the same as no one owns it? It's a good question, but
yes.
Anyway, so these are the things going through my mind. I just wanted to mention.
That actually relates to Jill's question about the kibbutzim, because it's commune, at least commune or communist in a sense, and that's everyone owns it, but that's not talking about ownerless. Just because an individual is not owning it, the whole kibbutz is exacting control.
Yes. Let's read this Rashi, and then we're going to do breakout groups for a few minutes. Then we'll come back and we'll do some sharing and another text, and we'll do some summaries. So let's see, how many people do we have in total? We have 17, so that would be I think 4 breakout groups, or no, 5 breakout groups, 5 breakout groups maybe. So that we're 3 or 4 people. So after we read this text, and I give you guys some thoughts about what to discuss, Psachio, you'll put people into the breakout rooms, okay? Into 5 different breakout rooms, and you'll discuss whatever you want to discuss, actually.
Could you break them out into the rooms?
Oh, sure. Yes, I can. Let's read this text first, though. Hannah, you're on. Are you in a position where you can? And if you can't, don't worry about it. Are you in a position where you would like to read a text?
Yeah, sure. I was just eating before, so.
No problem.
Starting where?
And the Sabbath of the land will be food for you.
And the Sabbath of the land will be food for you. You should not make use of them as a property owner would, but all must be equal, shavim, as regards Shemitah produce. You and your hired servant and your resident stranger will be food for you all, only that which has rested from ownership and been declared free to all may you eat, but not that which has been hoarded/guarded by you. For you and for your servants, because it states in Exodus 23:11, the needy of your people may eat. You might think the fruits are forbidden as food for the rich. So scripture teaches, for you and for your servant, owners and servants are included. And for your resident stranger, even non-Jews.
Mm-hmm. So that's a whole other level of equality we haven't discussed yet, between the Jewish people and the not Jewish people living in a community. So let's see, what questions do I want to give you to ask? To what degree does this inform what you would do to make yourself hefker? To what degree does this help you reflect on your experience of the Shemitah year? And what lesson have you learned from Shemitah? Could be in the class or some other class or your experience that you want to be able to share with other people, that you think is worth sharing with other people. So let's see, breakout rooms.
Can you put those questions in the chat?
Yes, I will do that after I send you to breakout rooms, okay? Oops.
Yeah, how come I'm not in a group?
You are, but the other person in your group didn't join. Would you like me to send you to another group?
Well, you know what? I missed everything, but I wanted to, I'm kind of embarrassed to join a group. I got I had an emergency, but I would love to listen if I may, but otherwise maybe it's a sign I shouldn't, because I'm not going to be able to be very helpful.
I think your opportunity to listen is a good thing. So I'm going to move you into one of the rooms.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Okay, here we go. I'm just,
It's only us.
the groups are, a bunch of the groups are just two people.
Okay. That's what we seem to be too, although now that you've shown up, we're three.
Yeah.
But so far, we've only been locating ourselves geographically.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I should actually mention that. People say that.
Bear wants you to know that he moved here from Long Island, where Hurricane Sandy, was it Hurricane Sandy that hit Long Island?
Yeah, and New York City, yeah.
Yeah, that's where Bear came from, the blue unicorn. And Woof Woof wants you to know that he orders from DoorDash and they deliver kids' meals, and I still haven't figured out how he does that. In the basket, the animals, they order things like they've ordered Girl Scout cookies and they got delivered.
Wow.
What do the animals in the basket say about Shemitah?
They're learning about it. That's why they're here. And Sweet Potato and Bo's a horse, and Sweet Potato's my friend Rosie. She died last year. Probably not. She had a brain tumor anyway. So her angel bear, because it has wings, came to live here, and they want to know why they're not in the picture.
Okay. Okay. And you both shared about your data.
Well, Marilyn's in Portland, Oregon, and I'm in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago.
So
And we learned about Obama.
Yes, because we overlook the construction site of the Obama Presidential Center.
Oh my!
Because we didn't remember what we were supposed to be discussing.
A lot of trees got taken down for that.
I did put it in the.
Did you say trees were cut down?
Oh yes, quite a few trees in Jackson Park. Other trees have been planted, but a lot of old trees were removed. So
let's say a few words about Shemitah before we don't have time to.
We don't have time.
Yeah. Did you see the questions that I broadcast?
They flashed up and then they disappeared. I don't see them in the chat.
I didn't see any questions.
Oh, that's annoying. So
well, wait, I have it in a smaller screen, so maybe if it did go across, maybe I just didn't see it.
Let's not worry about that. I guess the way I did that is not the right way.
David's here to tell me not to worry about things today. I have a diagnostic mammogram at 12:30 and my mother died of breast cancer, so we're not going to worry about anything today.
Well, it makes sense to pay attention to things, but if you can't do anything about them yet, then maybe don't worry until you know what's going on. So, Larry, what's your feeling about how ready you are to receive some revelation?
Yeah, I have to open up a little more. I think but I do realize now that in a certain way, well, I guess so. I guess in a way I'm open, but it's sort of in reverse. There must have been a reason I came today to this. Well, the reason was David Seidenberg sent out an invitation and I had time. But I'm realizing now the two things that have been going on this year, not directly Shemitah, but that I've been involved in, I now can add this kavanah, I think, to these activities. One is that we have been, as someone said in the discussion earlier, letting go of a lot of stuff. Susan, my wife Susan, has been forceful about this. We're not going to live forever, and we have a lot of stuff, including a lot of books and some of those are going. So that aspect of kind of letting go of ownership, I could bring this Shemitah kavanah to that perhaps, and think of it partly that way.
Mhm.
The other is just that our synagogue here in Hyde Park, Rodfei Tzedek, conservative shul in Hyde Park that we are part of, set up this earlier this year, what in Chicago is called a love fridge. It's a fridge and a pantry that stands outside the shul, and anybody can put stuff in it or take stuff from it. And a few of us have been on the committee to try to keep it supplied. And so the stuff that goes in there is ownerless. We don't own it. It's out there for anyone to take. And it's in my mind an extremely minor rectification of the vast inequality that exists in society. Hardly a Band-Aid even. But it has made me realize, so I'm usually at morning minyan at least 4 days a week, and on those mornings I take on the task of bringing stuff out from our supplies to stock the fridge and the pantry outside. And I'm realizing both how much need there is, because often there are people waiting for it, and usually by the next day, most of it's gone and needs to be resupplied. But also just how much goes to waste in our society. I mean, we're a part of this tiny supply chain of, there are other people on the committee who go to these, pop-up food pantries that are supplied by the Greater Chicago Food Depository that's sort of dealing with the excess food that's left over and trying to get it out there. And there's plenty for everyone, but you can't, it's just very hard to get it to everyone.
I wanted to say that the love fridge may be much smaller, but it seems in my mind to embody Shemitah a little bit more.
Mm.
And
Than giving away my books.
No, I don't mean, I mean the big food pantries.
Oh, the big pantries.
Yeah.
Well,
and the reason why I say that is because it's not because of, not in terms of impact and importance for people's survival, but in the sense that anyone can put something into the fridge, and you can be poor and need something from the fridge, or you can just be hungry and you forgot to bring your lunch that day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you don't have to be poor. And I think that embodies Shemitah in a special way that other things might not. Does that make sense?
And we're not keeping track of who shows up, what they take.
Yeah.
We wonder about it, but we're not tracking it.
That makes good sense. I think that I'm trying to decide if I should amend up. I think, yeah, we're going to close the room. And so,
well, Marilyn, nice meeting you and your beasts.
Oh, they're not beasts, they're nice little animals, but they say nice meeting you too.
Hayot hasadeh or not hasadeh.
David, that one said the debts are canceled on Rosh Hashanah. Didn't you say they're canceled on Sukkot?
David, I think you're muted.
No, Hakel comes on Sukkot. Debts are canceled the minute Rosh Hashanah starts. So Sunday night is when debts are canceled. Yeah. So it's 1:22. We'll have a few more minutes of discussion. And I did say I was going to do one more text. Let's see if we want to actually do that. Yeah, this is the last one I want to do.
Can you tell me again what the word hakel means?
Means gathering, communal gathering. So I'll read this one since time is short now. And this is interesting. It's almost this is from Maharal of Prague, who remember said Torah is entirely intellectual, sikhlit rather, and therefore it's not connected to the material world, and therefore it's separate from humanity, which is materialistic. This is almost exactly the opposite. It's from the same person though. So even though creatures may all be from one species, there are differences that don't reach their essence. This one's big and that's small. This one has great strength. That one is not strong. But they are equal with respect to what reaches their essence. And so the Torah is given universally together and is the singular fulfillment of the collective, without extra and without lack for any individual. It has exactly what every person needs, even though we're different from each other, is what he's saying. And this is the fulfillment of the species, to the point that all will be equal. As it's written, one Torah will there be for them all. And because of this, the Torah was given in the wilderness, which is an ownerless place, for the Torah would be the fulfillment of the human species universally. So this idea that the Torah contains exactly what every person needs, no matter how different their needs are, because we're all from one species and our essence is somehow the same, is interesting in a number of levels, because it gives us a very universalist vision of Torah. It suggests a very universalist vision of Shemitah, which we also hear in Rashi's statement that it's everyone gets to be part of Shemitah, including non-Jews. Yeah. And I think for me, part of revelation is not what are the words of revelation, but the revelation of radical equality between human beings, which I think is what Maharal is saying, among other things, that the Torah, in the act of revealing the Torah, reveals the radical equality of all human beings. Yeah. And so at least in this very, very straightforward sense, we can say, I think, that all of us, to the degree that we dip into Shemitah, have moments where we get to experience the revelation of radical equality between human beings. And this also raises the fact that most of the time we live without that revelation. We live with all kinds of assumptions. I wanted to mention something. This relates to what Larry Edwards has said in our small group. Something about Shemitah that's essential that we heard in the machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai is that Beit Hillel emphasizes that to be hefker, it has to be available to rich and poor alike equally. And a lot of times when we do, like a food bank or gleaning, well, take gleaning, for example. Often people as volunteers will go out and glean and then bring all the food to the food bank for the poor people, as opposed to the way it was in ancient Israel, when the poor people would go to the fields themselves and glean themselves for what they needed. We have a community garden in the farm here at the synagogue at CBI, Abundance Farm. And across the lot from there is a food bank, food pantry. And what our farm has done is that we've made days for anyone to come harvest, and people from the food bank come, people who use the food bank come and harvest, but everyone can harvest, so that it's not as though, oh, this is for poor people, but it's equal for everyone to be together. And there are some kinds of meal programs where it's just the poor people, the needy people who get the meal. And in other places, everyone sits together, the whole community, including the poor people. And the latter kind of example is the kind of example that is more in the spirit of Shemitah. This idea that we can learn radical equality with each other, that we can enter a space in which we leave behind class differences, status differences, and encounter each other as pure humanity in some sense. That seems to me to be the clearest element of revelation that Shemitah brings us. Not the only, but the clearest one. What the Maharal is suggesting to me is that if we can reach radical equality, then we will be able to understand what it means to receive Torah. Then we will understand what it means to be hefker, to make ourselves hefker. And that maybe we will actually get to revelation by letting that happen. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to mention, and then we'll have time for comments, and we can go a few minutes. We started 10 minutes late. We can go a few minutes over. Is that the reason why the debt cancellation happens at the end of the Shemitah year instead of the beginning, I believe. It doesn't say this explicitly anywhere what the reason is. It just says that's what you do. Is that after living a year in equality with other human beings, the value of canceling debts in order to continue that equality is clear to everyone, including the people that own the debts. That it's more important to create equality between people than it is to collect your money. And that you will have had a year of viscerally experiencing how much more important that is. So that when the debt cancellation comes, it will feel like a gift and not like you've lost something. So, floor is open for any reflections. And it includes reflections that you might have had in your group, in your breakout room, that you think are worth sharing with everyone else.
Why would someone feel like they've lost something if someone cancels their debt? I'd be happy for someone to cancel my credit card debt.
No, we're talking about the person who owns the debt. You lend money to someone and then you don't get that money back because the debt that you own, that the person owes you, is what gets canceled. Okay. Thoughts?
Helena, I was just moved by what you said about equality because of the fact that, we come into the world with nothing. And then I've always been moved by the fact that in Judaism, at death, you're equal. And so you wear the shroud, or you have simple coffins, or even when I lived in Israel, you just got buried without a coffin. And that simplicity of how you end your life and how you begin your life is, for me, symbolized by what you just said about the equality of one another as evidenced through living Shemitah. That moves me.
Yeah. Which raises a whole other dimension of Shemitah. Shemitah as preparation for death as well as life.
Wow.
Yom Kippur.
Wow.
Yeah. Yom Kippur is also an experience potentially of radical equality. Carol.
I just wanted to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on this liminal space between now, the very end of Elul, and towards Rosh Hashanah, and then the 10 days, and then how you say the Shemitah actually ends at after. So this liminal space, especially like the next 4 days.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the time to try to do what I'm asking for us to do in this session right now, which is to consolidate what you've learned over the Shemitah year, to learn to be able to articulate what's important, what was revealed to you in the Shemitah year that you can carry through the next 6 years and on to the next Shemitah. How will this Shemitah help us change the world that we're going to live in when Shemitah is over? And of course, not having been in a society that practiced Shemitah, and that includes Israel too, where it's not kind of a universal practice of equality. The lessons and the revelations will be smaller than they would be if we were fully doing this as a whole world. So the big question really is, how can we make the world more like a world that can observe Shemitah, that can live in Sabbath? And really, we're talking about Sabbath, the potential for the whole world to live in the reality of Sabbath on at least some of the time. We only live in Sabbath some of the time, but it colors and brings light to all the other days of the week. And Shemitah has the same role for all the other years. Other thoughts?
Yeah, actually, can I, if it's possible, I could just jump in because we're at 1:30 and I think we should continue to go on with our thoughts and questions. And also I wanted to thank Rabbi David for teaching what for many of us will be our last Shemitah Torah in the Shemitah year, because and thank you for the depth. And then anyone who needs to go can go, and we can continue the questions and answers and conversation. On a personal level, I was thinking about your question about why is Shemitah at the end of the year? I think your answer was beautiful and probably spot on. Cynically, I feel like there would probably be, if you cancel in the beginning of the year, many people's Shemitah would be completely ruined because they'd get back into debt. And so you have this great equalizer where, the fact that you're in debt doesn't really matter during the Shemitah year. It's like a big Sabbath and you can share all the food that's around and then cancel at the end so that you can start anew. If not, Shemitah, you'd be back in debt. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's also possible people loan money during the Shemitah year, during the actual Shemitah year. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
I think Larry had his hand up.
Well, I just, thanks to these teachings, I'm seeing it also as this recuperation of wilderness, which is where Judaism comes from. Judaism is a wilderness tradition, religion. One invisible God whose voice maybe is heard, and that's it, very stark. And yet we are, many of us, I'm a city guy. I love living in the city. Many Jews are urban and have been for a long time. So it's an opportunity perhaps to recuperate the wilderness roots of Judaism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was a challenge that our ancestors were acutely aware of, that living in society cuts you off from a dimension of experience which is essential. And
the Torah is about going into the land and what kind of society you're going to create when you're in the land. But the Torah itself, quite intentionally, as we see in some of these texts, the Torah itself is given in the wilderness, in a place of Hefker. Mm-hmm. So the very opposite of the civilizational structure that you're going to set up.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Anyone else? Hannah, did you want to say something?
I just want to say, I came late, so I missed part of the conversation, but it was really a joy to be part of this learning. And I worked, so we were emailing, and I worked for Hazon, so it's cool to see how this all plays out. And the thing that I'm taking away from the Shemitah year is how we really own nothing in this world, in this life, and in a capitalist culture, it's very hard to see that. But I think the Shemitah year has been a really good reminder of that, so I'm gonna try to hang on to it for the next 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Good. Should I just call on everyone and see what they want to say? Aharon, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Lawrence for sharing that insight, because it really brought together for me this idea that you brought forward, David, and I hadn't really put it together, that this idea of the more than human world that we can understand, or is often maybe in one cultural perspective understood as supernatural, can be understood in another cultural perspective as simply wilderness. And that's and to think about our more than human world as wilderness rather than supernatural is reconnecting us in a way that I feel is it's much closer to us than the distance that we create from godliness, or that can sometimes be created for us in fairly intellectual modes of understanding those kinds of theology. So I deeply appreciate that. And it's romantic. It's a romantic idea too, but it's also it's a very good and non-literary present conception of more than human world, or I don't even know what to call it. It's the non-supernatural, but it's wilderness. I don't think I have the right words for bringing all those different concepts together yet, but I deeply appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Arrow?
It's a pretty intense emotional time for me at the end of this Shemitah year, in thinking about ownership and the burden of ownership, because for many years, my family and I have been blessed with the ownership of a large redwood forest that we've protected and continued to steward. And it's getting more difficult for us to continue to do that. We are continuing to do that, but it is becoming more difficult. Our kavanah has been to protect this forest that we happen to be stewards of. And I'm doing my best to slough the negative part of the burden. And I'm always in a state of gratitude and joy at the nature surrounding me. But figuring out how to slough the negative part of the burden.
Do you want to share anything about what that negative part is, or is it better not to?
It's just that our financial situation has changed, and it's become more difficult for us to continue to, I mean, it's happening. We will most likely be able to hold on to our homestead and our piece of land, but it's a different situation than it has been for the past 20 years. It's more part of our everyday life that we have to continue to figure out how to protect the land around us, and hold on to our homestead. Most likely will happen, but it's in our everyday thoughts and worries. It's our absolute blessing / burden and mission in life to be good humans and protect the forest around us. And so figuring out, I'm still in this Shemitah thoughts and debt thoughts. And so I do have a ritual that I'm ready to do, which will be, before a mikvah, before Rosh Hashanah. I have a plan for sort of a composting ritual of this negative spiritual thing of debt. But the thought of getting to my kavanah and mikvah for the ongoing year is where I'm stuck, but that's why I'm here.
Good. If you decide to crowdsource funding to help you with that, let me know.
Thank you, David. We're far from there, but that is a very kind and generous offer. And we do have wonderful news, which is that the piece of property directly next to us, which is also 55 acres of redwood forest, was just put into a conservation easement. the past few months due to a lot of work on some work on our part, but mostly work of a wonderful human, our neighbor. And we are incredibly blessed to have been part of saving our neighboring property.
Okay, that's good. Next comments should be relatively short so we can come to closure. Marilyn, Lexi, and Jack.
Make mine really short and just say thank you. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about just the flows of giving and receiving, and how to increase the flow.
Mhm. And then I'm not sure if Jack is listening at the moment, but if you are, you're welcome to contribute. And if not, I want to thank everyone for being here and give a donation to Hazon for doing these kinds of classes. Yeah. And I wish you all Shana Tova, and that on the other side of this, we get to share more revelations with each other. Thanks.
Good sweet year.
Shkoyach. Thank you. Shana
You want to
Tova.
sing? You want to sing the Harachaman Shemitah together?
Yeah.
Let's. I'll put that up on the
Post that.
screen. I'll show you in a second. If you need to go, it's really okay. But here's the Shemitah Harachaman. Harachaman hu yashiv libeinu el haaretz el haaretz. Harachaman hu yashiv libeinu el haaretz el haaretz. L'mahan neshev yachad ima b'shovta kol shnat hashmita. Kol shnat hashmita neshev yachad ima b'shovta kol shnat hashmita. Kol shnat hashmita. Shana Tova, everyone.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.
Thanks, Rabbi David. Lashon Tova.
Shana
Thank
Tova.
you, Lawrence. Larry, I just saw that.
Very nice to spend
Be
time with
well.
you all. Take care.
Thank you for enriching my Shemitah year.
Amen.
Amen.
Let's stop recording.